Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us and thank you to the National Association of Regional Councils for hosting the webinar today. My name is Lori Clark. I am a program manager at the North Central Texas Council of Government. So we serve as the Regional Planning Council for 16 counties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or centered on the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I should say. 16 large Texas counties. So we have with us this afternoon, Emily Dalecki, a Renewable Energy Policy Analyst for the Strategic Energy Analysis Center at the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. She has a background in sustainability and environmental management, and I will let her provide a little bit more of her own background here in a moment. She's going to provide information on an update to the Department of Energy's Solar Power in Your Community Guidebook. NREL was responsible for many of the edits and changes made to the guidebook, which highlights new and existing technologies to maximize benefits of solar for all communities. And as we all know, really expanding the benefits of clean energy technologies to all communities is a really hot topic right now, and something where I think a lot of communities can really use some guidance to make sure that the benefits reach everybody, especially those who are traditionally underserved. And before I hand over to Emily, I want to touch on just a few things that we've done at the North Central Texas COG related to solar. We started our solar journey, if you will, I can't believe it, about 10 years ago. We teamed up with the National Association of Regional Councils and Mid-America Regional Council on a project called Solar Ready 2. Mid-America Regional Council had already done some great Solar Ready work. And that really revolved around providing best practices to local governments. And so we did some things like a permitting checklist, created kind of an ordinance guide, like if you want to be more supportive or permissive towards solar versus if you want to be more constraining, we didn't use that word, but if you want to have more boundaries around solar, like here's different language that you might want to use in your ordinances. More recently, we have been a technical advisor in the SolSmart program, and 6 of our municipalities are SolSmart designated. We've actually received regional designation for SolSmart. So we're working on increasing and adding another 10 designees among municipalities in our region. And within the past year, worked through our regional codes committee to formalize some language around how we recommend local governments in our area integrate some of the solar ready provisions in ICC building codes. So we've done a lot, and we've set up a website, and I just caution everybody, once you set up a website, you have to maintain it. So we are working to create kind of a landing page and a portal for a lot of regional resources. So that is our role relative to solar. And we also serve as the host for Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities. So as transportation electrifies and adds load to the grid, solar becomes even more important from a transportation perspective. And so we're also working across our agency to try to weave all of that together. So with that, I am going to hand things over to Emily and have her share some of the, NREL provides excellent resources. If you're not familiar with NREL and all the work that they do, I encourage you to check them out. So Emily, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. There we go. So first, I just want to say hi to everyone. It's so great to be here with you. And as mentioned today, I'm going to talk to you about how local governments and how regional councils alike can help make solar more affordable and accessible to all. And really this resource that can help you achieve that, which is the Solar Power in Your Community Guidebook. So all of the topics I'm going to cover today are drawn directly from this guidebook, and it's a resource I really encourage you to access and share with your member governments, especially if any of these topics really pique your interest. So as mentioned, my name is Emily Dalecki. I've worked at the National Renewable Energy Lab for just over 3 years. To give you a little bit of background, the National Renewable Energy Lab, known as NREL, is one of 17 national labs founded and funded by the U.S. Department of Energy to tackle the critical scientific challenges of our time. Specifically, NREL focuses on finding creative answers to today's energy challenges, and we have decades of focused leadership in clean energy research, development, and deployment. Now, during my time at NREL, I primarily focused on solar policy related projects, and those include updating this guidebook from its decade-old predecessor, as well as some work related to both residential solar and community solar. Now, I also want to give you some background on the guidebook itself, as well as the solar industry as a whole. Now, this resource was last updated in 2011, and so much has changed in the world of solar since then. Over the past decade, we've seen hardware costs decline and installed capacity rapidly grow. And the most recent data that was actually just released this month from the Solar Energy Industries Association shows that an estimated 142.4 gigawatts of solar PV was installed in the United States as of this month. Now, that is enough solar to power 24 million households, which is a lot. And that growth is not expected to slow anytime soon. A recent study by NREL and Department of Energy called the Solar Future Study found that with aggressive cost reductions, supportive policies, and large-scale electrification, that solar could account for as much as 40% of the nation's electricity supply by 2035. However, today, solar makes up about 5% of electricity in the United States. And while that number is 11 times more than its share a decade ago, we will still need to install substantially more solar by 2035 to help meet these decarbonization goals. And of course, the challenge of decarbonizing our electricity sector is no small one, but communities will be integral to all kinds of solar deployment, including residential, small commercial, and community solar, all of which are discussed within the guidebook. So now you know the why. I want to go over the what. So this slide just gives a quick overview of the chapters that are included in the guidebook. And I won't be able to cover all of this content today as I plan to focus on a few specific topics. What I will focus on today includes making solar access more equitable. So I'll cover these two solar spotlights that you see here featured on the screen. And then I will also cover updating local policies and processes such as zoning ordinances, as well as educating and empowering potential solar adopters in your area. So if any of these other topics are of interest to you, I really do encourage you to refer back to the guidebook, or please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to share additional resources with you or discuss any additional questions you might have. So this is my last housekeeping slide here. This slide just reviews the structure of the guidebook. After each topic area is introduced, it also includes real-world successes from a wide range of communities that have actually implemented the topic or technology that is discussed. So you can see here a map of included case studies on the slide. And then along with those case studies, we also include a list of supplemental resources. So this includes reports, references, and tools that offer more information and guidance on these topics. Our guidebook does a great job of introducing a lot of important topics, and we really wanted to make sure that readers would have the tools they needed to get more in-depth information on any of these discussed topics so they can implement these opportunities within their own communities. So now I'll dive into some actual content here. The first topic I want to cover with you today is updating local policies and processes, which can really help create the foundation for building a sustainable solar market in your area. By incorporating solar energy considerations specifically into codes and ordinances, local governments can increase solar accessibility and deployment. Now, solar access and solar rights are two important topics that can be integrated into those ordinances. And solar access refers to the ability of a solar owner to receive sufficient sunlight to operate the system productively. Tree shading, which may cause solar exposure conflicts, is an example of solar access. Now, solar rights, on the other hand, encompasses a property owner's right to install a solar energy system. So prohibitions that restrict a property owner's ability to install a system, maybe such as building height restrictions, are an example of solar rights. Solar access and solar rights laws encourage the adoption of solar by increasing the likelihood that properties will receive sunlight suitable for solar energy production, protecting the rights of property owners to install solar systems, and reducing the risk that systems will be shaded and compromised once installed. So by logically incorporating solar energy considerations into zoning codes and ordinances, local governments can bring clarity to the responsibilities of various parties, achieve balance between stated government priorities, and also help avoid costly and time-consuming legal action as well. So within the guidebook, we do actually have a full list of solar deployment considerations which are relevant to zoning ordinances, some of which I have listed here. One of those I'll mention now is comprehensive definitions, for example, and this can encourage, we encourage including definitions for various types of solar systems. This might encompass solar energy systems, rooftop PV, ground-mounted PV, and the list kind of goes on and on. And by listing those and clearly defining them within zoning ordinances, it provides clarity and it also reduces barriers to solar deployment. Another great example is clear guidance on historic buildings. So by providing that clear guidance on historic preservation ordinances, the process for solar projects, as well as the process for solar projects within historic buildings or even just historic districts, that can really streamline the process for folks within those areas wanting to adopt solar. And overall, it can help reduce confusion for homeowners as well, which can be very beneficial. Now, we also discussed solar mandates and solar-ready ordinances. Solar-ready policies require that measures be taken to ensure that solar can be adopted with minimal structural barriers in the future. And that might include designing roof trusses for additional load and installing conduits for housing wire. Solar mandates, on the other hand, actually require new construction to be equipped with PV. Installing solar on new construction is about 65 cents per watt less expensive than a retrofit installation. And for reference, that's about 24% cheaper. And that reduced cost is primarily due to lower customer acquisition costs, permitting, inspection, and interconnection costs get reduced, as well as reduced costs from efficiencies and labor. I'm sure a lot of people on the call are aware that California was the first state to institute a solar mandate at the state level, which requires all new residential buildings 3 stories and under to install rooftop PV. But solar mandates and solar-ready ordinances are also being implemented at the local level in places like Austin, St. Louis, and Tucson. So these policies can help increase accessibility to rooftop PV by replacing the upfront cost of installing solar with costs spread out over long-term mortgage payments. So next, I want to talk to you about effective and streamlined local rules and regulations. Making these processes more transparent and streamlined can help reduce installation costs, and it can significantly increase adoption rates for solar energy. This is because significant variability currently exists in PV permitting and inspection processes across the United States and even within neighboring jurisdictions. So specifically, streamlining PV permitting and inspections can allow more residents and businesses to install and operate solar panels at a faster pace. Many jurisdictions are moving permitting to online portals to save time, and other best practices, including coordinating interdepartmentally to reduce redundancies, publishing an online permitting checklist to clearly lay out requirements, and updating your permit fee schedules. Now, some jurisdictions have even moved to using an instant permitting platform such as SolarApp Plus that can conduct the permit review process instantly and saves hours of review time for local staff and also allows projects to move to installation at a faster pace. SolarApp Plus is a tool that was developed by DOE and NREL and allows for automated solar permit reviews, and it's actually available to jurisdictions at no cost, which is great. If that tool is of interest, please feel free to reach out to me. It's a project I work on as well, so I'm happy to talk to folks about that tool independently. But back to our topic here, similar practices can also make inspections take place at a faster pace. And best practices for inspections include setting and enforcing time requirements for inspection, publishing inspection requirements online so those are clearly laid out, and allowing for virtual inspections as well. But overall, clarity and transparency throughout these processes can really help ensure that solar can expand into underserved areas and help reduce existing disparities in solar adoption. In the guidebook, we do further discuss best practices related to these processes for communities to adopt, including additional resources and case studies, of course. Now, one topic that we discussed throughout the guidebook is equity. But not only did we want to include equity within discussed topics, but we really felt it needed to be discussed on its own as well. So we did that through these sections that we call solar spotlights. And the first is on low to moderate income inclusion in solar. Data has shown that not all communities have benefited equally from the uptake in solar deployment over the past decade. And LMI households currently represent 43% of all US households, and similarly, they account for 42% of residential rooftop potential. However, as of 2018, LMI households only represented 15% of residential solar adopters. Now, at the same time, LMI communities typically have substantially larger energy burdens than their high-income counterparts. And what that means is that a larger proportion of their income is going towards paying their energy bill. The median energy burden for a low-income household is at 8.1%, which is more than 3 times that of a non-low-income household, which is about 2.3%. Solar energy technologies can be used in combination with energy efficiency and other programs to reduce the energy burden of low-income customers. And solar can offer additional benefits such as reduced need for bill assistance, reduced utility shutoffs, and local job opportunities. Now, numerous states have implemented programs and policies to address the disparity in solar adoption to date, but we feel that local governments have the opportunity to implement their own programs on the local level. In the guidebook, we list specific strategies that can be implemented locally to ensure that LMI communities are included in local solar efforts, some of which are listed here on the slide. Now, one example is installing solar on multifamily homes, which is something that can be organized with local housing authorities and may be especially beneficial to renters. Communities may also consider a Solarize campaign targeted for LMI customers. And a Solarize campaign is something that I will talk about again on another slide in my presentation. Now, our next solar spotlight highlights racial equity in solar adoption. Recent analysis shows that rooftop PV adoption rates are significantly lower in Black and Hispanic majority census tracts, and that is even when controlling for differences in household income and home ownership. So African American and Hispanic households are also disproportionately more likely to experience energy insecurity and utility disconnection. But local governments are in a unique position to help change this by striving for greater equity and access to solar benefits. So we present quite a few ways that local jurisdictions can help create a more equitable local solar market, some of which are listed here, and I'll touch on a few of these now. One of those ways is to adopt specific goals to ensure racial equity. These goals could include deployment, ownership, engagement, and workforce metrics, but they should really be addressing who owns and who is benefiting economically from solar at the local level. We also encourage accounting for historical injustices. These injustices, which may include redlining and environmental contamination in communities of color, should be considered when planning new programs or policy updates, as they can still impact these communities today. For example, previously redlined neighborhoods have fewer trees and higher average summer temperatures, and that leads to higher air conditioning needs and costs, as well as higher health risks. Now, these opportunities and many more are, of course, detailed within the guidebook. And I will also mention that one reason that we have seen this disparity in solar adoption is due to general distrust or lack of understanding for solar adoption. So our guidebook discusses opportunities to educate and empower potential customers through inclusive strategies, which can supplement the public's knowledge about solar energy, as well as promote consumer confidence and help consumers and customers decide whether to install solar energy systems on their properties. Community members can be engaged using a variety of outreach activities to promote solar energy technologies, and educational materials are one of the key options. And we encourage these to be developed to focus on specific topics depending on where local priorities lie. And of course, some of those options are listed here on my slide. So where energy resilience is a concern, a community may highlight how solar plus storage can reduce vulnerability to electricity disruptions. For renters or households with roofs that are poorly suited for solar, which means maybe they're not large enough or they're too old or need upgrades, materials might highlight other solar opportunities, such as a community solar program, which is an offsite solar array that can be subscribed to by customers who receive credits for their subscription, or programs that help make homes solar ready and might include upgrades to their home so that solar can be installed. But overall, different groups of people have different priorities related to adopting solar. And so targeted and inclusive educational materials are important for achieving broader acceptance. We also encourage making these resources inclusive by making them accessible in different languages, as well as sensitive to differences in motivation for solar adoption. But overall, they should really also be tailored to the needs of vulnerable subsets within your community as well, who might not have as much understanding or typically be targeted for educational opportunities around solar. Partnering with a trusted organization can also help increase the acceptance and understanding of solar technologies, as well as increase the effectiveness and equity really of any effort. Community nonprofit organizations that are focused on renewable energy can assist local governments by providing resources, identifying local solar advocates, and individuals that can represent community views, enabling equitable deployment of solar, and helping with other aspects of solar implementation. But we also encourage connecting with community-based organizations beyond those that are just focused on renewable energy. And this is important for developing an improved understanding of community needs, diversifying the pool of potential solar adopters, and addressing local barriers and equity issues related to solar. So in the guidebook, we discuss engaging these organizations in the decision-making process and using appropriate strategies for gathering public input. We have additional details about what types of organizations that stakeholders that a community may consider coordinating or partnering with, and the value that each of these organizations or stakeholders might have to a community when organizing your local solar effort. So I definitely encourage you to refer back to the more detailed list in the guidebook. The next topic here that I will discuss with you today is opportunities to make solar both affordable and accessible to residents and local businesses through local solar programs. There are a few specific programs and financing opportunities detailed in the guidebook, but today I'd specifically like to share more with you about solarized campaigns. These programs reduce the upfront cost of solar by giving groups of individuals or businesses a discounted rate for bulk purchases. These campaigns can reduce solar costs by up to 20% via savings from reduced marketing costs and economies of scale. So solarized campaigns can be organized by any entity. That of course includes local governments or councils of governments, but it also includes nonprofits, solar installers, or other third parties. One example of a local government partnering with another organization to run a solarized campaign is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee partnered with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, which is an organization that has led more than 42 solarized campaigns across the Midwest. Through the partnership, the city of Milwaukee was able to assist in having solar installed on more than 200 properties at a discounted rate. Another great example of a local solarized campaign is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They launched their own solarized campaign in 2017, and they modified the traditional solar group buy structure to enable low to moderate income residents to participate. The program did lower solar adoption costs, but it also instituted a fee for traditional customers, which guaranteed payments to solar developers that were providing PV on LMI households. As of 2021, their program had put solar on over 6,500 homes, and they'd also created 98 local jobs, which is really exciting to see. So solarized campaigns can be a great option for local governments, and they can be critical to help meet environmental goals as well that maybe local governments have helped establish. Though I was not able to cover solar target setting today, I did want to at least feature this one slide, which includes a number of tools that can be utilized to assist in solar planning. These tools can help accomplish important steps in understanding your local solar landscape and the solar potential in your area. And many of these tools can be utilized at multiple levels, from the state level down even to building or system level. They offer key capabilities such as creating a solar baseline, understanding local energy demographics, as well as scenario planning. So I really do, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I do encourage you to refer back to the guidebook to learn more about the rest of these tools and how they can be used to leverage to meet your local solar planning needs within your communities. For each of these tools, we include information on who developed the tool, a general description, but also we include information on exactly how a community can leverage these tools for their own needs. I would also like to highlight some DOE programs that may be of interest. So the SolSmart program, which I know is already mentioned today, recognizes cities, counties, and regional organizations for making it faster, easier, and more affordable to go solar. Some benefits of the program is that it does provide no-cost technical assistance to help communities become open for solar business. And SolSmart has many resources for making solar accessible and affordable, many of which you will see highlighted within our guidebook. Now, additionally, for those interested in community solar, which I was only able to briefly mention today, we encourage stakeholders to join the National Community Solar Partnership. That is a free organization to join, and as part of the NCSP, stakeholders can also apply for technical assistance. They can access resources, and one thing that's really great is that they can engage with an existing community that is working through similar programs or maybe problems as themselves. And before I open it up for questions, I would like to mention that I would love to hear from you. So if the solar power in your community guidebook, or even if you found some information from today's presentation useful, please do provide your feedback. You can send that directly to me at my email listed on the screen, or you can use the QR code to just fill out a short survey and provide some feedback that way. So with that, I know I covered a lot of information in a very quick time period. So I would like to open it up for discussion and potential questions that you may have about the guidebook.
Great, thank you, Emily. I'm really excited for ourselves to dive into the guidebook and post it prominently as a resource for our communities. There are a couple questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you were able to see those, or
Yes.
Melissa, if you want to unmute yourself and verbalize. I don't know if you're able to do that.
And if she's not able.
Okay, okay. Oh. And Melissa, if you could maybe type into the Q&A, are you coming from the perspective of a municipality or a regional agency? And before Emily addresses those questions, I can jump in a little bit. Melissa asked, some local governments may be further along than others. If the guidebook might provide information that's a little bit overwhelming, how would you recommend starting? And then also where we see regional organizations having the greatest impact. So I'll just jump in a little bit from my perspective. And some of the things that we have done is so one of the first activities that we did was just hosting a workshop, and we brought in National Association of Regional Councils, and I think at the time maybe it was the Solar Foundation or maybe it was SolSmart, but we were really just providing the venue. As a regional entity, we knew all the local governments, so we know who to invite among the municipalities, and we had a meeting space. And of course, now you could use a Zoom account or a Teams or whatever. So we just really facilitated the discussion. And I will tell you, Emily talked about solarized programs. We had some really engaged advocate groups, citizen advocates who had attended that meeting. They walked out of a meeting in May, and by the end of the summer, there were 80 solar installations being installed through a solarized program in the city of Plano, Texas. So just having the right network of people, and our cities know who some of the really motivated community advocates are, really kind of got us a really motivating win kind of out front that helped keep everybody in the region motivated and continuing to look at other solar activities. And one thing that we've done recently is just survey our cities, like here's a bunch of different topics about different best practices. What do you want to get the most information about? And then we might not be able to provide the information, but we know who to go and turn to and get that perspective and get that expert presenter. So those are a couple of things that we've done.
That is such a great response, Lori. It's going to be hard for me to follow that up. And I will also say it's so great to hear of a local example of a solarized campaign. And that's a huge reason we wanted to highlight some of these case studies within the guidebook, is because we wanted concrete and clear examples of communities from all sizes, all across the country at different parts in their own solar planning to be highlighted so people could see real world examples. But to answer the root of Melissa's question, which just to reiterate that, it was, how would I recommend that community with little involvement in the solar field best use the guidebook, as the information provided can be overwhelming. We definitely understand that, and we did our best to build out the guidebook in a way that it could be valuable to communities who are either just starting off or communities farther down the road. For communities just starting off, I think the first chapter is the best place to start. It's going to talk about how to engage with your community, what stakeholders to even bring into the conversation, and also to understand your local solar landscape. So, I think there's so much information out there, and it can be hard to know where to start. So we tried our best to kind of establish some of that information in the first chapter. As the guidebook goes on, we of course cover other topics that might come to mind more as your solar planning evolves a little bit more, and as you understand where local priorities lie around solar. So I think if you're just starting off, I think the first chapter is going to be your best place to look. We include information on tools for getting a local solar baseline. Understanding your local energy demographics as well can be really important, and who to start having these conversations with. So yeah. And then I did see that Melissa had a second question there, which was based on your experience with solar programs, where do you see regional organizations having the greatest impact? Oh, and that's what Lori just answered. So I think we covered those. Does anyone else have any additional questions for us?
I have a couple questions actually myself. You had some
Yeah.
really great numbers, Emily, about the cost of solar being 24% less, I think it was. Was that if you are adding solar to something that's built solar ready, or is that if you are integrating solar on new construction?
Great question. That is specifically for solar on new construction.
Okay.
And part of that is, I kind of listed a few of the reasons for that, but you're kind of combining all of your costs into one process, as opposed to having to readdress those costs later down the line, which is where some of those efficiencies come in. But yeah, 24%, that's a pretty significant decrease in the cost of having solar installed on your home. So we definitely encourage communities to consider those, adopting policies that would require solar installed on new construction. But of course, that's not feasible everywhere, and we understand that. So that's also where those solar ready policies come into play. So even if you're having new construction in your community, that you can just have those homes equipped so that solar can easily be installed at a future time, you can definitely still see a reduction in the overall cost of solar being installed just from having that home be solar ready.
Great. And then one other question, does the guidebook include anything that gets to issues of like consumer protection? Like sometimes there's the door-to-door sales guy who has, you'll never have to pay an electric bill again, and you're actually going to make money. And then when that doesn't pan out and they go running to the city, and are there any resources that you would recommend along that front?
That's a great question, Lori, and that's actually one that I've received more frequently as of late. Like just within the past couple months, I've had other folks asking similar questions. As the guidebook currently stands, we do not have information on consumer protections, but I really appreciate you bringing that question forward, because that's the type of information we want to incorporate in the future, and we will definitely be updating the guidebook on a regular basis. So I definitely appreciate you bringing that question forward, and I apologize that I don't have a better answer for you today, but what I can say is it's something that is definitely on our personal agenda to make sure that information is incorporated in future resources.
Great. We've got another question from the Q&A. Can you speak to public buy-in for solar programs?
Yeah, so what I'm getting from that question, and Melissa, maybe you can add a little more detail if I don't accurately address that, but when I see public buy-in, what I'm guessing what you mean is really getting your local residences and businesses to be personally invested in solar, to want solar to be installed locally, and to, feel good about the choices that are being made. And I covered some options in my presentation, about educational materials, but I do think that a level of actual local engagement outside of just providing educational materials can be really valuable there as well. Within the guidebook, we talk about some inclusive ways to create public meetings, for example. So for when we encourage public meetings to be held, of course, public meetings aren't accessible to everyone in the same way. So we encourage there to be free parking, if possible, maybe childcare to be available for those public meetings. Now, if public meetings aren't really an option for your local communities, we also have a few other options listed in the guidebook. One that I personally love is creating a local survey just to get feedback from your local community on what is important to them. That might not immediately create buy-in from your local residences and businesses, but what it is going to do is show you what topic areas are going to be most important and where priorities lie, so that you can help create and foster that local buy-in.
That's great. And one thing I'll add on is, because I was in a meeting with some community members a week ago, and somebody was talking about solar, and there was a very pointed remark that that's great if you have $10,000 available to put this thing on your roof, but the people who need it the most, to Emily's point, the people who have the highest energy burden probably don't have that money at their disposal, or they don't own their home, they're renters. And so I think, depending on the demographics of your area, you may want to look at the community solar model and how that can be more accessible, maybe for low and moderate income households, or households that rent.
Absolutely. Some topics on top of that that I did not cover today but are in the guidebook is we also talk about having solar installed on local government buildings. That can include schools, or of course, that could even be up to your city hall or something like that. And that can bring benefits into your community as well. That might not immediately reduce energy burden for some of your LMI residents. However, when there are natural disasters or things like that, what you are doing is creating a safe space that may have electricity while the rest of the grid is down, for your community to come into and have a safe space. And as the community solar point, always a great option. It is, of course, fairly state dependent, just because state policy does vary quite a bit on community solar, but we do discuss that in the guidebook. And I will mention, I'm a renter and I'm subscribed to community solar, so it is a great option for me, and I get some bill savings out of that as well, which is always great to report.
Personal testimony is always fabulous.
You got it.
And Eric asked, have any regions done health benefit analysis of solar installations or solar generation using EPA or other tools?
That's a great question. Health benefits are not something that we cover so much, but it is something that I'm happy to look into, and maybe I can follow up with you on that, Eric, if I find additional resources from any of my colleagues.
I think EPA has an AVERT tool, is the acronym, AVERT, and I believe there is a health benefits module, and that's a really great point that I don't think we've explored that ourselves either. Any final questions for Emily? Garrett asked, is there any guidance provided for working with rural communities to develop solar policies or deployment plans? Excellent question. We have a really big sprawling region. They may have similar challenges as LMI communities, but also may be lacking in the ability to conduct necessary outreach and creation of plans. Is this where a regional organization should step in and help?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And while I will say we don't have any materials within the guidebook that are expressly laid out for more rural communities, we did try to keep rural communities in mind. So while we don't spell that out, we did try to develop approaches within the guidebook that could still be applicable within rural communities. And another thought I had just left my mind. Let me reread the question and maybe it will come back to me. Oh, when we developed our case studies, we also tried to include rural communities within our case studies. So it may be a valuable option for you to look at the guidebook as well. And we have an appendix at the end that just lists out the case studies, so you don't have to scroll through the entire thing and try to find each individual one. But that might be a valuable option for you as well, to look at just the case studies within that appendix and look at some of our more rural community case studies as well, just to see what options have already been implemented in some rural communities to date. That could be another good option.
And I just remembered when Emily mentioned installing solar on public facilities like schools or city halls or things like that, just so everybody who's attending today knows, there were changes made to some of the solar incentives, the tax incentives and the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. And there is now a direct pay option where public agencies that do not have a tax burden can elect to take a direct payment option to get the equal amount or an amount. I don't know if it's equal, I shouldn't say that. And some of the guidance may still be forthcoming, but that's something that if local governments or public agency staff have looked at solar and they're like, yeah, but without the incentive, we can't really make it pencil. There is a change in the tax credit information now, and energy efficiency conservation block grant money is out, which has a formula program option. EPA's climate pollution reduction program is an option where plans and then implementation grants maybe could include solar, and then greenhouse gas reduction program money coming from EPA also seems to screen solar based on initial glance. So there are a lot of opportunities there for definitely the public sector, but I think EPA's greenhouse gas reduction program has a specific call out on community solar. And so diving into the guidebook that Emily presented today might be a really good first step in anticipation of that EPA funding program coming out here in the next couple months, to kind of start seeding some conversations in your community and see if somebody might be ready to take the lead.
Great shout outs, Lori. And I will also mention, if you do visit the landing page for the guidebook, which is energy.gov/solar guidebook, if you visit that, we do have information on the Inflation Reduction Act there as well, and how that can be utilized by local communities. But Lori just listed a great list there of other opportunities for you all as well.
It's mind blowing and mind numbing. I'm trying to keep up with it all. So we are coming up on just a quarter till. So one final call for any questions that we haven't addressed yet. Going once, going twice. Not seeing any additional questions. Thank you again, Emily, so much for the dive into the guidebook and kind of the sneak peek at what we can get. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon and taking time out of what I know is a really busy time for everybody who's working in the public sector right now, and spending some time with us, and to Jessica and the NARC team for putting the webinar together. Appreciate it.
Huge thank you from my side as well. Thank you all for attending, and thank you to Jessica and Lori for helping set up today and facilitating. This has been a great opportunity, and I will just encourage everyone to definitely check out everything the guidebook has to offer. And if any of it is overwhelming or confusing, or you have any other feedback, please do reach out to me. We're very open to that, and we're happy to incorporate feedback into future iterations.